Reporting for briefing, sir.
You know, Kif, among certain females, I'm better known for my debriefing.
Well, friends, we find ourselves gathered here once again to discuss Futurama, the 12th season, the second of that Hulu revival, all the way up to what can't possibly be true, but it's episode 8, otherwise entitled Cuteness Overload. Spoilers do lie ahead. I do just want to give you a warning if those aren't for you. Now let's crack into the actual episode, an Amy-centric episode, kind of the second one this season. However, I say that because the original Amy episode, the Bugalo one earlier on, very heavily pivoted into Bender. Very quickly, she was more of the side character. But I do really appreciate how this season is giving us a lot of time with more of the, I was going to say side characters, but for the sake of just being annoying, I'm going to say some of the ancillary or the third tier or tertiary characters, this being a Beanie Baby episode. But I say that with a strong asterisk because this episode did what a lot of good Futurama tends to do and really cushions all of that topical type stuff. Again, Beanie Babies are the least topical thing to the current year. Heck, I don't even think Beanie Babies were topical when Futurama first premiered in 1999. But the concept behind the story they were trying to tell absolutely, by the end of the day, worked for what it was trying to do. This was just utilizing something that's probably the most common denominator as far as the collectible craze goes in our collective memory. Sure, there's other things going on, specifically something I've been into in the past, any Funko product out there, but that probably wouldn't have the collective memory to tie back into if you watch the show in the future as something along the lines of Beanie Babies does. And at the same time, it allowed for a bit of commentary as far as what the Beanie Babies actually contained within themselves, while also allowing for the egg joke and the Bart Simpson joke. Touch on some of that more later. But I really did like the fact that we start things out here with Kif and Amy and their family. I was very, I guess you could say, concerned that this was going to be a plot point. They were going to birth the kids last season and then kind of never touch on them again, similar to what they did with Cubert. Now, I don't think getting rid of Cubert was necessarily a bad decision because he's almost never actually worked in the show, at least in my opinion. But to have something so grandiosely set up, the change in the dynamics and the structure of the show, moving characters forward, to then not reference it, I thought that would have been a detriment. However, they are really relying on the fact that now Amy is a mother, Kif is a father, and they have these children that aren't necessarily being overused. I do like the fact that they appear in the background sometimes, and then in episodes like this, which is a very heavily Amy-centric episode, they are also being utilized while still giving our main cast enough to do, and still giving even other side characters enough to do, those being Dupe, Zap Brannigan, and all of that stuff, that even though I don't think the Beanie Baby plot was the strongest thing on its own, it really interwove with everything else going on, as well as other themes already presented in this season, to feel like it came out being a pretty good, a pretty fun, a pretty interesting episode. Even though not all of the pieces within the episode were the strongest things on their own, I definitely think it's more of a case of the sum being stronger than its parts, or whatever that phrase actually is. A nice visit back to the orphanarium, which actually moved along the plot of Amy's children being spoiled, obviously coming from a rich family herself. She doesn't know any other way but to spoil. I liked that being kind of counterpointed with the orphanarium experience of Leela. Now, I do think it was a bit of a mispoint to not really have Bender's relationship with these children ever be acknowledged whatsoever, to the fact where when the kids were actually addressing him, they were addressing him as somebody that was just a new acquaintance, not somebody who was, for all intents and purposes, their father for an entire episode earlier in the run of the show. Again, I know it's a minor nitpick. It didn't really fit into the show or the story they were trying to tell, so I will let it slide. I do feel like it could have added another level of fun and maybe a couple of cool jokes and quips had they actually acknowledged that in the background, or even just with one or two lines when the kids were addressing Bender. Something else I've been calling for this season is to actually bring back a Dupe-type storyline, and very early on, Kif does get called back to Doopy. Duty, Doopy, however you want to say that. I thought the pun worked. It wasn't the main focus. It was a fun side tangent story, but as I already mentioned, it very much was intrinsically linked to the main plot, the main storyline going here, and they all came back together and converged before the end of the story. thus adding to the overall tapestry and cohesive feeling of this episode, and that is what I really liked. Plus, it allowed for the great Amphibious 9/Earth joke.
But one of the dupe's most important planets.
Not Amphibious 9, my homeworld.
Important means Earth, Lieutenant.
Which really lent itself to feeling like a jab at Star Trek, where nothing else really matters. Earth is the only planet in the entire Federation that anybody actually cares about. And speaking of Star Trek, as well as tying into things we've seen earlier this season of Futurama, the Beanie Baby subplot, both good and bad, felt a bit derivative and reminiscent of things we've seen before. So they were kind of similar to Tribbles in Star Trek, but it felt a little bit like a sideways version of the Bugalo reveal, where they just think they're these mindless things the entire episode, but shock and awe, they're actually being controlled by a big brain. Now, that wasn't the Bugalo. The difference with the Bugalo is they were brainless because they used a hive mind. Here, they were brainless but being controlled by the alpha Beanie Baby. I keep saying Beanie Baby. I can't actually remember what they were called in the episode. Fun Bags or something like that, I think. Always great to see a nice jab at The Simpsons in Futurama, and this was quite an extended one where they were going after the homeliness, the non-cuteness factor of Bart. That was a fun time. Also, absolutely loved that we never actually saw these Beanie Babies move. They were playing up the horror and the intensity. These things are just trying to stalk you and cuddle you to death, but we never saw them move. They would show them in a close-up. They would be in one position, cut away to a reaction shot or something. Then when we cut back, we would see them in a new, more deadly position. I love that. There was no need to do that. They have all the budget in the world to animate these things doing whatever they wanted to, but the way that they did a more obscure, low-budget horror kind of fake-out type of thing, that really worked for me, and that was a type of detail that I think really added to an episode where the overall Beanie Baby-ness of it all could have fell a little flat, but at least they took it in another direction to add a little bit extra to it. Plus, having the beans actually be eggs, or a way to self-replicate these things. When you destroy them, they just birth more. I like that. Now, we never got any real revelation as to who, what, and why these things were, but I don't think that was necessarily needed. It actually kind of adds to the unnerving, sinister nature several of the episodes of this season of Futurama have had. I don't know if they're trying to lead us to a grand revelation somewhere down the line or not, but that's 3 or 4 episodes this season that have ended with this sinister feeling, invasion feeling, end of the world feeling. And for the 3rd or 4th time this season, this is another episode that's either ended with or shown us throughout the episode a landfill cluttered with stuff that's, in essence, our own doing. We got to see that with the discarded library books earlier on. We got to see that with the discarded clothes a couple of episodes ago. And now we get to see it here with all of the discarded Beanie Babies. All of this, I suppose, is trying to play on the same facets of consumerism, capitalism, the way that we just kind of throw things away and forget about it while we're destroying the earth, environmentalism. All of those things, I'm sure, are being tied in here. But it does seem like there are themes running through this season, at least in some of the better episodes, that are really tying it together. And I'm curious as to if this is going to lead to a grand revelation at the end of the season, or if they just had several things on their mind when they were writing this season, and they kind of came out in different aspects throughout this season. All in all, I do think it was another pretty good episode. I don't think it tops the last one for me, but we are now at a point where this is absolutely a huge step up from season 11. But what did you think of this episode? Did you like all the concepts being juggled? Did you like all the characters? Or were you kind of bored and put off by the Beanie Baby aspects and really thought this was another letdown? Whatever you thought, leave it all down below. Like, share, subscribe, join, and do all those YouTube things. But until next time...
They just made a harmless delivery and stole some stuff. Nothing illegal about that.